This video is sponsored by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform to build your own website, shop, or portfolio and create a compelling online presence. Hello healers and homeopaths, my name is tvSkyne, and League of Legends has a lot of champions who could really use a rework. Zilean, Hamumu, Corki, Cho'Gath, Teemo, Anivia, Rammus, Vhagar. These all look like PS2-era game models that got lost on the way to the bargain bin at GameStop and snuck into a League of Legends box when no one was looking. League of Legends used to be sold in boxes, by the way. Did you know that? That was a thing. And it makes sense, because these champions are all over a decade old and have received no overhaul more significance than the occasional texture fix. But there's another class of League of Legends champion who is no less in need of an overhaul, but whose problems are ignorable, who look bad in their way, but don't look so bad as to be a real problem. Janna, Nidalee, Malzahar, Xin Zhao, Lee Sin, these characters all fit into this particular category of champions who really should be getting maintenance and updates and reworks, but who won't, because their situation isn't dire enough. A rework won't generate any substantial hype or engagement, and in the case of champions like Lee Sin especially, they have a lot of skins that would need overhauling as well, and that is expensive. Riot won't commit the resources to making it happen, not because they couldn't, but because, not really worth the effort, not really enough return on investment, let's spend it on something else. This category is also home to champions that have actually received visual updates just a long time ago. Visual updates which definitely made them look better than their original forms, but which, with the relentless advance of time, have circled back around and become kind of outdated and weak again. Ashe is one such champion, see my redesign video for her details, and so is Soraka. So, in this video, let's take a crack at that. Let's look at the problems that exist in Soraka's design and explore some ways that they could be addressed. Now, the disclaimer that always comes with videos like this is that art and design are subjective. There are no perfect character designs and there are no perfect solutions, and I do not have the power and wisdom to divine or define what characters objectively should look like. These videos are about exploring ideas, not mandating changes. I believe the suggestions I'm about to make are improvements, and I stand by them, but there is no objective truth in art, and anyone who tries to tell you so is selling you something. We all on the same page? Good. Let's get started. Soraka is one of the original 40 launch champions for League of Legends, and her very first original model sure does show that. League of Legends spawned from the shadows of Warcraft 3, and the very early model design in the game really does reflect that, clearly imitating the clunky action figure geometry of Blizzard's fantasy aesthetics at the time. The enormous dinner plate feet, the spiky geometry fur, and disproportionately large weapon are classic hallmarks of that style of design. She's also notably more sexualized in this version, with a strip of cloth basically barely covering her front and her delicate bits, and she has a lot of very loud detailing, all that gold ornamentation and jewelry that adds a lot of visual noise to the design. And that's all good enough for an independent upstart Defense of the Ancients clone, but 3 years later, in 2012, which at this point is a decade ago, good god, Riot decided that she needed a serious overhaul. And that is the model that survives in the game to this day. We can see a lot of these changes through the lens of moving away from the geometric Warcraft 3 style. The dinner plate feet are shrunk, the silhouette is clarified, the detailing has been dampened, the horn is shorter, she's generally a lot less cartoony and distorted. Additionally, she also seems younger. You can tell this especially when you compare the old and new splash art. Her new model features larger eyes, a smaller and less prominent nose, and smoother skin, all of which contributes to a notably younger feeling character. She's also been desexualized a bit. Her clothes stick to her body like latex, but no more side boob and much less implication of barely concealed nudity. And I really don't think there's an argument to be made that her rework doesn't look better. Like, the sheer difference in polygon count alone is a big upgrade, but also the updated form is just a much more technically sound design. The streamlining of detail and the clarification of her silhouette especially contribute to a much more cohesive design, and the de-aging of her features is motivated by a change in her storytelling. Soraka's original story is deeply tied to Warwick. In fact, she created him. He was a Noxian mercenary chemist, a chemical engineer spreading misery in Ionia where Soraka lived, and his crimes were so great and infuriated the otherwise peaceful Soraka so much that she cursed him with the power of the stars, transforming him into a werewolf. But in turn, Soraka was punished for abusing her powers and lost much of her magical strength. That story changed a bit with her rework. Now, rather than Soraka being a powerful mage enraged by Warwick's crimes, it is much more of a personal story. Here, Soraka is a gentle celestial being living in an enchanted grove, and Warwick comes to her apparently as a distraught husband begging her to heal his wife who is dead in his arms. Touched by his devotion to her, she promises to help him, and Warwick manipulates himself into a budding friendship with Soraka. Then he pretends to go after the men who killed his wife, and Soraka, who is deeply worried for him, follows. When she sees him nearly being murdered by assailants, she breaks her pacifism and uses magic to smite his attackers. That act robs her of her sacred immortality, and in that moment Warwick strikes, driving a dagger into her chest, hoping to take her heart as a powerful magical reagent. Then Soraka curses him to be a werewolf, heals herself, and sets out into the world newly mortal to try and find a purpose in her life, and she is deeply wounded both in a physical and a spiritual sense by Warwick's cruelty. This story is all about broken innocence. Warwick abuses Soraka's kindness and naivete, and she, in her idealistic desire to see the best in people, fails to perceive his cruelty and selfishness. And from that perspective, yeah, making her younger, more doe-eyed, that all makes sense. She's meant to be more inexperienced and innocent. But if you followed League of Legends for a while, you might know that Soraka has nothing to do with Warwick anymore. He's now a creation of Singed and lives in Zaun, while Soraka has moved to Targon, where her celestial nature now belongs. And Soraka has changed as a character as well to fit the changes that have happened in the lore around her. Now, she's a celestial with a capital C, a godlike cosmic being who watches over reality from beyond the stars. She's a particularly kind-hearted celestial who decided that in order to help guide and support the mortals, whom she saw inflicting great suffering on themselves and others, she should dwell among them. So she poured her great celestial power into a mortal form and became Soraka the Star Child. And now, for 1,000 years, she has traveled on Runeterra, healing and guiding and advising and falling in love evermore with mortal life and beginning to see a great beauty in the chaos that it creates. Her celestial form cannot actually be contained in a mortal vessel, however, and it is constantly burning her from the inside. She doesn't show it, but every moment she's on Runeterra, she is in some form of pain, and nothing hurts her more than actually using her power. But she stays here anyway, out of duty and out of love, determined to help whoever she can, however she can. But wait, hang on. She was changed to a younger and more innocent design to suit a story all about innocence and naivete. But now that's not who she is at all anymore. Soraka in the current lore is ancient, experienced, she knows the ways of the world intimately, and her compassion is born not out of ignorance of the world's cruelty, but out of defiance to it. She's wise, nurturing, forceful, caring. She's really very motherly now. So wouldn't that new change in her character mean that now her old design has a bunch of... Yes, it does. Soraka, as she exists as a character now, is meant to be a celestial being poured into a physical form that is constantly straining to contain her. She's meant to be this wandering healer and physician, more ancient than history and capable of seeing the very weave of destiny and reality spread before her. She's a nurturing figure, a guide, a teacher, and occasionally, she's a melancholic beholder of the follies of mortals. But no matter how bad we screw things up, no matter how cruel or awful our failures, she sees the beauty of a greater destiny unfolding before us, and she believes in our capacity to do and be better. Her color story, halfway between the stars and Earth, expresses this character pretty beautifully. Soraka, in her cabin, hears the howling of wolves outside and thinks, right on time. On the mountainside of Targon, a young girl is desperately fending off a pack of hungry animals. Soraka steps in and uses her magic to drive the beasts off, but when one of the animals is injured in the fight, she kneels down and heals it as well. It bites her arm savagely, but she does it anyway, and it's described that the pain of the injury is nothing next to letting the pain of celestial magic flow through a mortal body. The girl, for her part, is severely frostbitten and scared. She's climbed the mountain to prove that she's strong, she's tired of being called weak, and Soraka, while healing the girl, gently suggests that there might be other paths, other ways to live. Would you like to hear about some of them? Let me brew you a cup of tea while we talk. And if you just look at her design, how much of that character vibe comes across? Like, how much of that maternal, wise, caring, nurturing helper who always knows just what to say and who knows just what you need to hear, how much of that comes across here? She does look mystical, like she's purple and she has a horn and goat feet, but to me, this design is still the young, wide-eyed idealist, the naive star child from the Grove who trusted the wrong bastard. To me, that's what the design is saying. And it's not that this design couldn't possibly be an ancient, experienced, worldly, globe-trotting guide character. Any character design can be anything, so long as you make up an explanation for why it looks that way. But a design that only works if you make a bunch of excuses for it isn't really a very strong design. A strong design generally doesn't need to be justified. A strong design will justify itself. People look at it and they'll just get it. So, we would like Soraka to look more experienced. We would like her to look more worldly. We would like her to look like a nurturing guide and guardian. We want her maybe to look a little bit more maternal. And on top of that, it would be cool if we could represent her celestial nature. Thematically, it's a big deal that Soraka hurts herself to help others. It's a symbol of her generosity, her willingness to give of herself. So how do we start to get all of that into her design? You'll find out right after I say thank you to the sponsor of this video, Squarespace, an all-in-one platform designed to help you build a professional and compelling online presence. Squarespace makes it easy to build a website, as evidenced by the fact that I managed to do it. Once upon a distant past, I used Squarespace to host a webcomic and a personal website, and even though the comics have aged poorly, the site still looks pretty damn good. And if you are a creator of pretty much anything, Squarespace allows you to create members areas where you can post exclusive content for paying subscribers, whether that's videos, newsletters, courses, or image galleries. And if you want to sell your work, whether it's physical or digital, Squarespace has quick and easy options for setting up a portfolio, print-on-demand integration, and a full suite of online storefront tools to help you manage sales and fulfillment. So, head on over to squarespace.com to start a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your site, use the link squarespace.com/tvsguy for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Back in the spring of 2019, I expressed, I think on a stream, the idea that one way to improve Soraka's design would be to make her more motherly, more of a mom-Soraka. Sab, the robot, a character artist and 3D modeler, got inspired by that and created this. It's a fairly simple alteration of the character, no changes to the costuming or anything. It just adds some definition to her face, a few lines here and there, which gives her some more age, and it bulks her up, giving her thicker proportions. It leans into some of that classic visual language for a mom bod. Now, I got quite excited by this because that's really cool, and so I commissioned Sab for a full model, a full sculpt of this version of her. It took a few months because, they have other stuff to do, but eventually they came back with this. This is still mostly the base form of Soraka, just bulked up a little bit and made more motherly, but there is one key change that I made. Underneath the bandages on her arm, glowing cracks spread across her skin. Her celestial power burns her when she uses it. It cracks the shell of her body like porcelain, and here we show that. She already has the bandages on her character model, but now we're using them to cover up something, to show that, yeah, she will definitely hurt herself to heal others, but she also doesn't really talk about it. She hides it away. She says, oh, don't you worry about that, that's no problem, which again, very kind of a motherly vibe. So, I think this design is definitely an improvement over her base form. Here, Soraka has that mom energy. She doesn't look wide-eyed or naive or childish, and she does look like the kind of person who would heal your frostbite and then sit you down for tea to give you a long talk about what kind of a person you want to be. She looks like she would listen with a sympathetic ear. She looks like she would give you good advice. She looks like she would give you good hugs. She looks like that gentle guide and teacher that her story says she is. On the other hand, she maybe doesn't so much have the vibe of like an ancient globe-trotting legendary healer. We've kept the costuming and detailing of the original pretty much intact, and that costuming just doesn't really communicate the idea of a wandering healer or a far traveler. It doesn't even really communicate healer, honestly. She just kind of looks like a typical sorcerer type. There's really nothing to connect her to that discipline. So this is probably a good start on a better design for Soraka, but there's still room for some improvement. A thought I had while working on this video was, what would be the absolute minimum change that you could make to Soraka that would still tell her story better? Like, if you wanted to improve on the character's storytelling while changing as little as humanly possible about her design, what would you do? And what I came up with ultimately was this, Celestial Soul Soraka. It makes no changes to the base character design, but it adds an interesting visual effect. A golden, translucent mirror image of Soraka that hovers just outside of her body and which mimics her movements as though puppeteering her. It obviously shouldn't be 100% visible at all times, but say when she uses her ultimate or really exerts her power, it could flash into visibility briefly, lighting up the battlefield as her celestial magic is unleashed. And if you're wondering who I commissioned this from, no, this is me, actually. That's why this looks a little bit scuffed. After several years of full-time YouTubing, my illustration skills are rusty. Anyway, this was mostly just a idle thought to illustrate the idea of a minimum spec redesign. And while I do think this does a better job of communicating that Soraka is a celestial being, essentially a god, who's putting on a mortal body like a fursuit, it also distances her from life. It distances her from the body that she's in, and that kind of goes against her story a little bit. Soraka very explicitly chooses to live inside of the mortal experience. That's part of her sacrifice. And this design unfortunately implies that she's outside of it, which isn't quite right. So I think as an absolute minimum update to Soraka that changes as little as possible, yeah, this would do a better job of telling her story. It would get across more of what she is, but it wouldn't necessarily be a great idea, and it would come with its own problems. Let's move on. If you follow League of Legends fan art on Twitter, you might have come across the work of Sinizade before. They already draw quite a bit of Soraka fan art, and they have an excellent design for her. So, I commissioned them to draw another one. This version of Soraka, I think, has more the aspect of a worldly traveler. Her dress is a simple, practical robe in multiple layers for proper protection. She's got belts and pouches overflowing with healing herbs, and she's decorated with trinkets, gems, and knickknacks, the sort of stuff that you'd pick up when you're just out and about. Her staff is more like a walking stick now, and we're leaning less into the mom energy and more into the mommy energy. And one detail I really love about Sinizade's version here is, remember how in the first design I gave her cracks and scars under her hand wraps because her celestial power is leaking out from the inside? Well, here we have the same idea, but less dramatic. Soraka isn't slowly cracking under the skin from her power, but it does peek out here and there. Specifically, it peeks out from under her stretch marks, which glow golden with her magic from within. Now, stretch marks, along with chub, fat, wrinkles, and scars, are the kinds of completely normal, utterly benign, ordinary features of the human body that can cause the insecure, the weak-minded, or indeed just shitty people to throw tantrums on the internet. Ordinary people have been convinced by the beauty industry to hate ordinary bodies, and it is sad. Your body's not your enemy, you know? And physical flaws aren't a moral failure. If you ask me, they aren't even flaws. And think about Soraka, a character whose whole concept revolves around a love for life, a love for mortality, a love for the fragile and the brief and the imperfect, a character who chose to live in a flesh and blood body. What kind of storytelling can we do about how she lives in her body, how she thinks of it, how she treats it? What can we do if we stop treating immaculate beauty ideals as the default? Like, I don't think Soraka would be particularly vain. If anything, I think she might like having stretch marks or scars or wrinkles. Those things are evidence that you have lived a life, that you have been mortal in this world, so why would she see them as flaws? Anyway, this version of Soraka improves, I think, both on the base design and on our first version, but there's room for improvement still. Like, yes, this looks much more like a traveler, and she maintains the maternal, nurturing energy, but it's still fairly conservative as a rework. If we really wanted to lean in to Soraka's nature and themes, how far could we push them? Soraka's whole deal is that she's an unfathomably powerful celestial entity masquerading as a mortal. She pretends to be just a clever healer, just a mage, just a wandering herbalist. As it says in her bio, over the millennia, legends of the Star Child have filtered through all the lands of Runeterra. Some tribes of the Freljord still speak of a far wanderer, a horned healer who soothed the icy bite of the most brutal winters. In the depths beneath Son, rumors float of a lilac-skinned medic who would purify weary lungs from the ravages of the alchemical grey. In troubled Ionia, the oldest myths of the Vestaya Shire recall a seer who communed with the stars themselves and called upon their light to both heal the wounded and scorch those who would do further harm to the First Lands. And when I think about that kind of character, I inevitably end up thinking of Gandalf. Gandalf is a Maiar, essentially an angel. He's a being of genuinely incredible power who travels Middle-earth in the guise of an old man, better to guide and advise the mortal races onto better paths. So, why not use that archetype as the starting point? Which is what you're looking at right now. Soraka the Grey, essentially. I commissioned this work from Ron Kieran Broyd, a professional concept artist who has actually worked with Riot before. Ron is looking for work, incidentally, so if you need a concept artist who's damn good at their job, one's available. Anyway, this is Soraka as a hunched-over, harmless-looking old lady, with a thick traveling coat and potions in her belt and arms all covered in bandages. Her staff is cobbled together, a crude moon lashed to a stick with string, and she seems, for all the world, just like someone's harmless old grandmother. The cloak here is used to conceal her form and body, just the same as the bandages on her arm. It's the visual language of hiding something. Not maliciously or in a sinister way, but there's a reason cloak is also the word for stealth mode. And what she is hiding is this. Soraka the White, as it were. The cloak is thrown back and now becomes a majestic fur collar. The gems on her belt are aglow. The celestial power is burning through her hands and bandages, and her staff becomes a star amidst a constellation, ringed by a crescent moon on fire with power. This is Soraka using her ultimate. This is Soraka calling down the wrath of the stars. In this version, when Soraka reveals her true form, she also becomes younger. Not childish or cutesy, but an adult woman more than a grandma. You could do it either way. You could keep her old and just harden the softness of her grandma form into the flinty, weathered complexion of a steely matriarch. That would also work, and it would be pretty cool, but I went with the idea of de-aging, in part to heighten the contrast between the two forms of the character, and also to play into a couple of ideas. The first is that for Soraka, the state and appearance of her body is a choice that she can make. She decides to live and appear as an old woman, and she can decide otherwise at any time. She is essentially a god in disguise, and the ability to change her appearance based on who she's talking to, what kind of situation she's trying to resolve, I think that's interesting as a point of storytelling. Soraka currently looks like the Utrani Vestaya of Targon, but if she had to go to Demacia to do some work, maybe she'd take on a human form, and if she went to Bandle City, hey, maybe she'd pretend to be a Yordle. The other idea I had was that when she channels her full power, that also puts the most strain on her body. So in order to channel her full celestial might, she will change her body to its strongest state in order to survive it. I'm not 100% sure, though, that latter idea works. Like, it works narratively, it works as a point of storytelling, but it's really tricky to get across visually. And in the context of especially League of Legends in-game graphics, it would probably be next to impossible to really make it work. It probably would just look like she de-ages, and we're so used to old mages channeling incredible cosmic powers in fiction that an audience probably wouldn't intuit that changing her body back to a younger state is because the strain of the power would otherwise be too much. Which is just how it goes sometimes in character design. Not every cool idea actually works out in practice, and sometimes you can have a great storytelling beat that just simply won't come across to an audience without some kind of a lengthy explanation. Which, like I said, strong character design generally shouldn't need those. Still, while it is not perfect, because no design is perfect, I will argue that this version of Soraka does a much, much better job than her base form of telling the story of who she is, how she lives, and what she does with her life. If you look at these side by side, and I were to ask you which one looks more like a disguised god that has wandered the world for thousands of years, quietly healing and protecting the people she comes across, I would personally be very hard-pressed to say, oh, the one on the right. When I was writing this video, the script for a while contained a section about fan service. Soraka is one of the well-beloved pretty girl characters of the game, and I wanted to talk about sexuality and attractiveness as a part of character design, what it's used for, and where it makes sense to deploy it. I commissioned some more art for that part of the script, but the writing just never really came together. Like, try as I might, I just couldn't make it really relevant to the video, and I ended up cutting that part of the script, but maybe I'll revisit it on another topic where it makes more sense to talk about. Still, there's no point wasting that art, so here's a quick little slideshow of some cute to sexy fan art I commissioned that didn't end up getting used. Soraka will never be reworked the way that I have just laid out. For one thing, Riot refused to do radical reimaginings of their characters anymore. Their reworks are generally very conservative. For another, well, the solutions I have proposed here do not work with Soraka's skins. Most of those skins are based around the wide-eyed, childlike innocence of her current form, especially Star Guardian, Cafe Cuties, and Dawnbringer and Nightbringer. They are deeply married to her status as a waifish pretty girl. Reworking the skins would be possible, but it would take a huge amount of effort, and Soraka fans, many of whom fell in love with the character because of her pretty girl appeal, would be understandably upset at having that part of the character taken away from them. I think my ideas are better as character design and better as storytelling, at least the way that the character is conceived of right now, but unfortunately, the art is not the only thing that matters to a product like League of Legends. Fortunately, caring about the product is Riot's problem. These videos are about exploring character design and storytelling. They're about the craft of art and design. And corporate products, with all their limitations and enforced capitalistic flaws, are a great jumping-off point to start this kind of thinking from. They are a great spark for better ideas. I've presented a few here that I like, and I'd be curious to hear yours down in the comments. Hey, thank you very much for watching. This has not been my most well-planned video ever, I think it's fair to say. I started on it when I saw that 3D render of a Mom-raka, because that kind of got me going on, like, oh, okay, like, what are some better ideas we could do for that character? Like, maybe we could use this thing for that. And then I sort of haphazardly went out and spent kind of a lot of money commissioning other ideas and messing around with it. This video ended up taking almost 6 months to make because I just didn't have a strong central thesis. I just couldn't get the script to work. So this video is a little bit of a mess. I kind of wanted to commission at least one more version of the character to show off some more ideas, but at this point I can't financially justify it. Like, even though this video is sponsored, it will not be making its production budget back. Let's just put it that way. And on that note, hey, did you know I have a Patreon? I do! You can give me money, and there's rewards and stuff. Like, only do it if you think the videos are good, and only so long as you don't spend any money you can't afford, but I would definitely appreciate the help. Anyway, I have kind of a lot of deadlines these next few months, so expect more videos, but there probably won't be time to do streaming, and yeah, no, Elden Ring is probably still gonna be on hold for a while, at least until my schedule clears up. Believe me, nobody wants to get back to that more than I do, but the rent needs to be paid. Thank you very much for watching, have solidarity with those around you, and may the tides of history wash gently over us all.